Shabbat Shalom to all of you who are partners in this ongoing dialogue with our weekly Torah portion. The Sedra this week is LECH LECHA, Genesis chapter 12, beginning with verse 1 and following. The reality of our dialogue became clearer to me this week when I received a number of thoughtful comments regarding my assertion that we should look at our world as being governed both by natural law and moral law. Both phrases universally known, but neither phrase is anything close to being crystal clear. Those who wrote expressed everything from grateful agreement to politely couched total disagreement, and some places in between. That, my friends, is the essence of a true dialogue. So please, let's keep it going. It was wonderful. Let's keep it going. What a wonderful, familiar, and well-traveled Sedra this is. Well-traveled, not just because so many thoughtful teachers have found meaning and message here, but Abram and Sarai literally start out on their travel to an unknown land here, obeying the will of a God whom they barely knew and barely understood. Our knowledge of the Sedra is wonderfully buttressed by well-known Midrashim that expand and explain and in some ways redirect the intention of the text. We know, for example, that Abram smashing the idols in his father's idol shop is not, I repeat, is not in the Torah. But nevertheless, Abram was an idol smasher, metaphorically at least. We know that stories describing Abram's existential angst are not actually in the Torah, but it's not a stretch to imagine what was going through our founding father's mind and maybe his heart and soul before he broke with the moon worship of his hometown. In our Sedra, God has a nasty encounter with Egyptians, a harbinger of things to come. Here is where Sodom and Gomorrah enter the Western mind, and sodomy becomes a word of poisonous derision, shaping our moral attitudes for thousands of years. In our Sedra, Abram enters into the first brit, the first covenant with God, a covenant and an occasion filled with mystery and darkness and flames and awe. I love that passage, by the way. Ishmael is born to Sarai's maidservant Hagar. Ishmael, of course, is universally viewed as the founding ancestor of the Arabic people. Isaac is then born to Sarai and will become the second of our patriarchs. The Midrashim surrounding all of this, in the words of the text, are as numerous as the stars in the heavens. The book of Genesis in general and the Sedra LECH LECHA in particular are rich with meaning. Some derive from the text. We call that exegesis, taking out of the text. Some implanted within the text, eisegesis, when you put it into the text. The eternal challenge of Genesis, the very reason why Genesis exists, is to set the stage for the world that we know. Whatever we have, whatever we know, must have its origin somewhere, and that somewhere is the book of Genesis. Hunting? Oh, it's there. Fratricide? It's here. Jealousy? Yep. Rejecting polytheism for a belief that will emerge in later centuries as real monotheism? Yeah, it's here. The 12 tribes, they're born in Genesis. The stage for Egyptian slavery in Genesis. Patriarchs and matriarchs assume their places in our imagination here. Everything starts here. And here we find the earliest stages of human beings trying to understand God, to be responsive to God, to struggle with God, and to fear and to love God. Rabbi Aviva Richman is the new Rosh Yeshiva of Hadar. Hadar is a fantastic setting for egalitarian Torah study, located on the Upper West Side of New York. Rabbi Richman, a brilliant scholar, and certainly complements and supplements the tremendous teachings of her colleague at Hadar, Rabbi Shai Held. Rabbi Richman acknowledges the rabbinic assertion that Abraham was the very first to pray shacharit, the morning prayer. Isaac was the very first to offer mincha, the afternoon prayer, and that Jacob, well, of course, Jacob initiated ma'ariv, the evening prayer. Now, my friends, there's very little history to support these assertions, but nevertheless, they have come to be embedded in our people's psyche. We don't have any indications in the text that Adam prayed or that Noah prayed. Both gentlemen, in fact, had many matters to set before God, and maybe they did do that. We just don't have any textual basis for it. Though we don't know what time of the day it was, we really do know that Abram prayed to God. Our first indication of prayer in the Torah is said to have been when Sarai was abducted by the Egyptians and God struck Pharaoh and his household with afflictions. Logic demands, does it not? If God did that, then Abram must have prayed, thus proof he prayed. But the Midrash seems at times to point in another direction. Some rabbis give to Sarai the honor of being the first person in the Bible to pray. She is even given words to speak, words taken right straight out of our liturgy. Ribon kol ha'olamim, master of all worlds. She said, Master of all worlds, there is no justice here. Abram heard you, received a guarantee from you, and obeyed. I accepted your commands on faith. I never heard you, God. I accepted you on faith, and I received no guarantees. Now, here I am in Egypt, thrown into prison by Pharaoh. I'm the one who ends up in prison. There's no justice, Ribon kol ha'olamim. Sarai, Sarah, isn't yet given a voice anywhere in the actual text. But some of the rabbis give her the zechut, the privilege of uttering the first words of prayer. This is astonishing as it is mostly unknown. And Richmond points out that Sarai was not the one in direct contact with God. She had never heard a word from God. She was never the center of anyone's attention. But in intense distress, at serious risk of being executed or being at least ripped away from her husband Abram, Sarai chose to set her case directly before God, as found in the Midrash. It was a woman who will point out to us, according to these rabbis, that prayer is available to us even if we have never had any sense of being close to or aware of the presence of God. Yet prayer is available to us. Abram had God's promises in his metaphorical back pocket. Sarai, no promises, no assurances, no history of relationship. She had the kind of faith that whoever the God of Abram was, that God would not support injustice. That God would not permit the world to unravel. That God would not leave her feeling alone and abandoned. By the way, we remember that later on it would be Hannah, soon to be the mother of Samuel, who is first mentioned as someone who spoke words of prayer to God without the accompaniment of sacrifices. She just moved her lips and prayed. So instead of focusing on which patriarch initiated which of the 3 mandatory daily prayers, shouldn't we acknowledge that some believe that it was Sarai and later Hannah, 2 women, who lived out the experience of independently, without any covenants, without any promises, independently acting out of faith to reach out to God. God may be silent, but we need not be silent. We can see where justice must be found. We can acknowledge where justice must be established, and then we can lift up our prayers to God and simultaneously embrace the power in our own hands to change things. So, thank you, Rabbi Richmond, for leading us to a real and meaningful treasure. Shabbat Shalom. Read the Sedra. Everything is in it. See you next week.